I'd like to try to speak, say a few words on the topic of what is Nibbāna. But first I'd like to pay homage to the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammāṃ sanghaṃ namasami. So there was a question which I didn't really have time to address. And it was something along the lines of, what is beyond Nibbāna? And what about the next sunrise? So I've been contemplating this question and seeing how I can address it. It's very interesting, these kind of questions sometimes that we have that are not so easy to answer. I'd like to speak first of all about a teaching, a sutta, that I came across. There's a question that was asked of the Buddha on a number of occasions. And on this occasion, this question came up for King Pasenadi, who was a disciple of the Buddha. He was traveling around his kingdom of Kosala, and he was in a small town. It had a name that in translation from the Pali means arched gateway, arched doorway. The place of the arched doorway. King Pasenadi asked his attendants, where is there a bhikkhu or a wanderer or a mendicant who I can go and see to speak on Dhamma? I have a question. And actually there were no monks, male monks in this area. There were no wanderers, but there was a very renowned bhikkhuni called Khema. So the king was informed about this mendicant who was living in the area. And he went to visit Bhikkhunī Khemā. And he asked this question. And the question was, what happens to the Buddha after he dies, when he passes away? And in the tradition of the day, it was very normal to ask a question in 4 different ways. It was a kind of frequent way in which a topic could be very fully explored. The question could be given many kind of dimensions in a way. So the question the king actually asked was, is the Tathagata still existing after death? Or does the Buddha, the Tathagata, cease to exist at death, after death? Or does the Buddha both exist and not exist after death? And the final option, does he neither exist nor not exist after death? So basically, this covers all the possibilities. The nun Khema, just like the Buddha, when he was questioned in this way, couldn't quite answer the question directly. The Buddha would on occasion say, this is not a suitable question. This is not a question to ask. Maybe you can consider asking a different question. On this occasion, the nun Khema didn't say that to King Pasenadi, but she did say, imagine this, great king. If you had some accountants and mathematicians and scientists in your court, and you asked them, please, can you tell me how many grains of sand are to be found in the river Ganges? Would they be able to give you an answer? And King Pasenadi quite quickly came back and said, well, no, I mean, that's just too difficult. There's so many grains of sand in the river Ganges. It would be impossible for them to be able to find out for me. I wouldn't be able to ask them. I wouldn't dream of asking them such a thing. And she went on to say, well, what about if you were to ask them to calculate for you and tell you how many drops of water are to be found in the great ocean? And King Pasenadi again said, no, that wouldn't be a realistic request. I couldn't ask that of them because it would be impossible for them to find out for me. And so in this way, the nun Khema brought King Pasenadi to this place of, well, consider this question that you've asked in relation to the Buddha, the Tathagata, the thus come, thus gone, is not really a suitable question, because the Buddha is like the ocean, vast, impossible to measure, beyond our ability to fully comprehend. Just as it's not possible for us to count all the grains of sand in the river Ganges bed, or all the drops of water in the great oceans. Some questions are not really answerable. The question of what is beyond Nibbāna is a question that is not really suitable. It's not a question that is possible to answer because there is nothing beyond Nibbāna. What is Nibbāna is a question that one could consider, kind of backtracking a little bit. Never mind what's beyond Nibbāna. What is Nibbāna? I'm going to see if I can put some words to this question. The approach of the Buddha in all his teachings, almost from day one, when he became the Buddha, his approach was an apophatic approach. As the Christians would say, it was the via negativa, pointing to what is not the truth, what is not the case, pointing to what we can know in order to direct us towards the ineffable, that which we cannot comprehend mentally, rationally, logically, scientifically even. So this approach, which really mirrored the approach of Hinduism from which the Buddha came, his whole background in India 2,600 years ago was a Hindu country, just as it is today. Hinduism was one of the main ways in which people related to the world and to spirituality. And this neti approach in Hinduism is very similar to the way the Buddha conveyed the Dhamma teachings. Not this, not that. Neti. For instance, in the Anattalakkhana Sutta, the second recorded sermon of the Buddha that he gave to his 5 companions, and in the course of teaching them this sutta, they all became arahants, they all became fully liberated. The Buddha was teaching in the Anattalakkhaṇa Sutta, not self-teaching. He was pointing to the neti approach. Look at what we can experience. We can't experience Nibbāna here and now, most of us. Yet we can practice the Dhamma. We can take up the Buddha's teachings and move in the direction of Nibbāna. How do we do that? We work with what we know. We work with what we experience. We learn through our ability to observe reality. And what do we have? We have these bodies. We have these senses. We have this mind. I point to my head, which is interesting. This mind, which is, I could just equally point to my heart bring the hands to the heart, or one could consider this whole body in relation to mind. There's awareness, in short. Awareness of what? Well, we can be aware of feelings, we can be aware of the body, we can be aware of thinking, perceptions, we can be aware of the mood, the emotions as they course through the body, and we can be aware of awareness itself, that which knows, the consciousness that underlies our experiences. So the Buddha in the Anattalakkhaṇa Sutta is directing us to pay attention to those things that we can know, these experiences that we're having, and see, where can I find anything here that I can call permanent, that I can call mine, me, that has any essence of selfhood in it. This was the direction of the Buddha, to seek in this way, to examine and investigate in this way, to see what is mine, what do I own, what can I identify with, what can I have in this experience, what can I control. Through this investigation, he pointed out, keep searching and see if there is anything that is permanent or controllable or ownable. And what we notice is that actually there isn't anything. Every experience is passing, is fleeting. And everything that I'm experiencing has this quality of impersonal. It can't provide me with any sustaining sense of selfhood because it's so fleeting. The experiences are fleeting and they're not in my control. I get to notice, meditating, that we get to see how there are dhammas arising and passing, but we don't have much opportunity to make things happen fundamentally. When we stop and sit, we can see there's a stream of dhammas, there's a stream of experiences that are just happening. And when we stop trying to delude ourselves into thinking that we're in control here, and just stop and put the world aside and bring the attention into the body and bring the attention to this mind, we get to realize that there is actually no agency here. There is no control. There is no driver of the vehicle. There's actually something like, as one nun famously said in the Pali Canon, in the verses in Saṃyutta Nikāya, she said, Vajira, she said, it's just like a chariot. This experience of mind and body, it's just like a chariot made up of all these different parts, materials, put together in such a way that we call it chariot, or nowadays we could say car. The tires, the windscreen, the body, the engine, and so forth. All these parts are put in the right places and kind of connected together, and we get in and we can drive it, and we call it a car. But actually, when we start to investigate Dhamma, when we start to meditate, in the same way as one would look at a car, investigating what is car, one could make a list of all these different parts, and one could separate them all out and see that very clearly that, each part does not make a car. A car is something that you label, this thing that's an amalgamation of all these different parts put together in a certain way. In the same way with the mind and body, we get to see, don't we? We get to really experience how this mind and body is an amalgamation of all these different aspects, body, all its different parts, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, memories, awareness itself. They're all different dhammas, And you put them all together, and one can imagine that there's this thing that has a life, and that has a history, and that has a future to worry about. But of course, it's just like the car. It's something that can be dismantled, and it's good to dismantle this thing, because we can start to get closer to the truth of the way things are. So in this Anattalakkhana Sutta, the Buddha is encouraging the monks, to see that this experience, moment to moment, is constantly changing. All these different components are to be seen separately, arising and passing. We can separate them out and see how impermanent they are. And in seeing that, how things arise and pass, Dhammas arise and pass, constantly changing, then we can also appreciate that it's impossible to call any particular part of this or moment of this me or mine or myself. And so the whole edifice can start to crumble, can start to topple, can start to deconstruct itself. This is freedom. This is insight. This is inexorably leading us towards Nibbāna. There's a beautiful simile in Saṃyutta Nikāya where the Buddha's again trying to describe how is this state of Nibbāna, of freedom from suffering, of non-reactivity, of absolute unshakability. How is this? What is this state? And he said it's like, imagine you have a house with a roof and 4 walls and a floor, and there are windows in the east, the north and the south sides, and the sun is rising outside, and you can imagine the light of the sun coming in the eastern window of this structure, this house. And the Buddha asked the monks, well, where would the light hit? Where would it shine? And they said, well, it would shine on the west wall of the house. And he said, yes. And what if the west wall was not there, did not exist? And they said, well, it would shine on the floor of the house. And what if the floor of the house did not exist? They said, well, it would shine on the water or the earth. And the Buddha said, well, what if they didn't exist either? Where would the light shine? Where would the light hit? These are the kind of answers that the Buddha would give to try to help us to appreciate what is this state, the state that is free from all greed, hatred, delusion. He would describe it sometimes as like a flame of a candle, dependent upon, of course, the wax. What happens to the flame when the wax is used up and the flame goes out? What happens to that flame? Where does it go? Can you find it anywhere? This was another way in which the Buddha answered this question of where does the Buddha go after he passes away. So, it's very difficult for us to put into words this understanding of Nibbāna, the goal of the spiritual life, complete freedom from suffering. It's very difficult to put into words, and the Buddha didn't actually spend a lot of his time trying to describe or explain Nibbāna. He spent so much more of his time actually helping people to let go of suffering and move in the direction of Nibbāna. It's like the handful of leaves simile, where the Buddha was telling us that there's this whole forest of leaves. This is how much I know, but this handful of leaves, this is how much I'm going to actually talk about. This is how much is actually useful. What is the handful of leaves that the Buddha spent most of his time sharing and elucidating for us? It was suffering and the way out of suffering. And so we don't have a lot of direct teachings on Nibbāna, the goal of the spiritual life. But there are a few. There are a few places in the Pali Canon where the Buddha speaks about Nibbāna, and he gives some descriptions for us. He describes it as the far shore, as the deathless, the ageless, the unborn, the unconditioned, the exhaustion of craving, the marvelous, safety, which interestingly is the same word, Khema, as the name of the nun who was teaching King Pasenadi in the sutta I was describing earlier. The unshakable, freedom from bondage, liberation. These are all ways in which Nibbāna is described in the Pali Canon, and many more ways also. There's a lovely teaching in the Sutta Nipāta where the Buddha is questioned. There's a whole group of young Brahmins who came to see the Buddha, and they all asked him marvelous questions. And one of them, called Kappa, which actually means eon in Pali, like an immeasurable, vast period of time. Anyway, Kappa asked the Buddha a very poignant question. He gave a simile in his question. He said, just like a river that's flooding, the current is very strong and it's sweeping everything away. So is, for us humans, so is aging, so is death, like this river that's sweeping us away. How can we find an island, a place of safety in this flood? The Buddha replied, there is a place of safety. There is an island where one can be free from aging and death. And he said it's a place of not having anything, akinchana, anādāna, not taking anything. This is the place where you can find refuge, not having anything, not taking anything, not being anything. This is the practice for us. This is the path. It's leading us toward letting go of anything and everything that we identify with, that we make something of, that we hold to in any way. To let go. As Ajahn Chah said, we let go a little bit, we have a little bit of peace. We let go a lot, we have a lot of peace. If we let go entirely, then we can experience unshakable peace. This is Nibbāna. So it's letting go. In a number of places in the suttas, the Buddha told us, whatever you think is the case, whatever you think is real, whatever you think is true, whatever you think is, the truth, the reality is always other than that. Again, this neti approach. It's like we're tunneling through samsara. And every spadeful of earth that we kind of have to shovel out of the way in order to tunnel through is another experience that is to be let go of, just shoved behind us, put behind us. Not this, not that. Whatever we think, the truth is always other than that. This is so helpful as a simple and short, pithy teaching from the Buddha, just to remind us that our practice is about undoing, unbinding. The word Nibbāna, one way of translating it, is no bana knots, no knots, untying, to be able to keep letting go, to keep dismantling the edifices, the structures that the mind has created over many, many, many past experiences of this kind of compulsion through ignorance to bring things together, to make things, to create, to identify with, to own and to suffer with. Whatever we make mine, we lose, because we can't own anything. So we have to experience loss for everything that we hold to, for everything that we feel we gain, there will be loss. And it's a very simple equation. As much as we hold on, that much we have to suffer. As much as we make mine, that much we have to lose. As much as we hold things dear, that much grief we have to experience. So, this is not to, turn us into kind of indifferent people who turn away from the world and shun any kind of experiences. Not at all. It's through experience that we can actually learn about reality and learn how to chart our course, to be able to sail smoothly across this ocean of Dhamma. So this question, what is beyond Nibbāna? There is nothing beyond Nibbāna. What is Nibbāna? And what about the next sunrise? What about the future, essentially? What about future pleasures? Many people, when they come across the Buddha's teachings, and they have a wrong grasp of the teachings on the goal of spiritual practice, the teachings around the concept of Nibbāna, they can get quite upset. And they'll say things like, and it may have occurred to you, what about all the people that I love? What happens to them if I become an arahant, if I become enlightened? What happens to all these relationships that mean so much to me? And what about the future? I think these are really good questions because they're like koans for us. We can unpack these questions. We can really explore what is the state of mind? What is actually happening to produce this question? Where's this question coming from? And we can tease out and see, is there any desire, wanting in this question? Is there anything underlying this concern that I have for the future? Is there something of fear or wanting or not wanting? Is there something that I'm holding on to here? Let me investigate that. Let me investigate my thoughts of the future. Let me consider what's happening when the mind moves into the future. What's happening in the body? How does it feel? Where does it take me? Many of these questions, we can seek answers outside of ourselves, and we can have good, Dharma discussions about these things. But I think for most of us, most of the time, the best way to answer such questions is to meditate and to investigate and to see what happens to these thoughts and concerns when we shine the light of mindfulness on these questions, on these states of mind. And we can see that the questions arise and pass. And the answers are often not on that verbal, rational, mental level, are they? That the answers come to us in a more kind of profound and deep and penetrating way as we practice. And we can start to recognize that, the mind that moves into the future is a mind of suffering. And there's always some wanting or not wanting there. And when I really look at that, I can actually see that the wanting and not wanting have a life. They arise and then they pass away. And I can watch the whole process. And I can see the beginning of that thought, the middle of that thought, and then I can see the end of such thoughts. And when those thoughts come to cease, what's left? What's left then? So, I guess what I'm pointing to is that in our experience, we can appreciate that the Buddha was teaching a spiritual path that takes us all the way to this end goal, this goal of Nibbāna, freedom from all suffering, freedom from all ignorance, from all desire, from all aversion. And it's a given. If we keep practicing, slowly but surely, we're moving in that direction. But also, even as we're practicing day to day, having the experiences that we have, noticing the arising and passing of Dhammas, we can experience cessation. We can experience things coming to an end. And it's good to notice that. It's good to notice when a thought, an obsession, a question, a feeling, an emotion, a worry, a concept, a view, we can really benefit by noticing when these things come to an end and the space that's left, what's left when they've ceased. This is not out of our reach at all. This is something worth paying attention to notice the third noble truth. The first noble truth, there's suffering, there's experience. The second noble truth, the reason we suffer because of wanting and not wanting, because of reactivity, because of thoughts of past and future, because of restlessness, because of not being fully present. And the third noble truth, there is an end to all of this struggle. There is an end to desire. We simply have to let go. Neti, neti, not this, not that. Discard, put aside. Don't hold on to anything at all, any kind of experience whatsoever. And as we cultivate this attitude of letting go, then we can start to really notice things arising and passing away, cessation. Oh, and it's beautiful, it's blissful, it's relief, it's release. It's like the tree under which we can rest in the shade by the cool pond, the still water. There is such peace in letting go. There is such peace to be found in allowing things to cease. And so we can experience a taste, a hint, we can glimpse Nibbāna, this cooling. Another meaning of the word Nibbāna is to cool. When a dish has been cooked and it's left out to cool down, it's allowed to Nibbāna. It's Nibbānaing. Nibbāna is like a verb in this case. It means cooling down. And we can experience the cooling down as we cultivate the letting go. We relinquish, we put aside, experience after experience, recognizing that this isn't it. This isn't the end goal of the practice. It's easy to allow difficult, painful, unpleasant experiences to pass, to not hold on to them, to let them cease in their own time. That's not so difficult, although we do tend to hold on to our suffering too, our pain as well. But it's easier to let go of this side of experience than it is to relinquish pleasure, bliss, the bliss of meditation when things are so peaceful, so calm, so focused, so one-pointed. But even this, again and again, the Buddha would say, whatever experiences you have, recognize that if there's an experience happening, then it's not this. This is not the ultimate goal. This is not Nibbāna. This is a milestone, perhaps. This is maybe something one can gain insight around. But whatever experiences we have, can we cultivate an attitude of letting go, of moving through, of being willing to bring in the understanding of change, impermanence. Let's see how long this lasts. Remembering that the Buddha said, whatever I think is real in this moment, the truth is always other than this, other than this. Can I move forward on the path? And so we cultivate this beautiful enlightenment factor of investigation of Dhamma. And just keep practicing not to get snagged up in anything, in any state, in any mind state, in any view, in any sense of having any idea whatsoever about what is Dhamma. The Buddha said even the raft of Dhamma is like a raft that we put together. He gave this beautiful simile, didn't he? You put this raft together, use it to paddle across to the other shore, to the far shore, to Nibbāna. And when you get there, even this raft is to be let go of. So what I'm really pointing to here is that whatever we think is the path, whatever we understand of the Buddha's teachings, whatever sense of direction we have, that's great. And let's use it and let's keep going. But let's remember that the truth is always other than that, and humbly open to learning, to being a beginner, start afresh every moment, just really with an open heart and open gaze. And then we can truly be letting go of past conceptions, letting go of imagination, letting go of thinking that we know the way, and opening to the way things really are.